Our first guest this morning, I think one of, and he'll be a bit shy about it, one of our truly great New Zealanders, contemporary New Zealanders, and someone whose life and career always seems to be in motion and evolving. We know that this week the government has lifted many restrictions, or is indicating that many restrictions are going to be lifted, particularly in terms of people coming in and out of the country. Pre-departure COVID testing is rapidly going to become a thing of the past. Our borders are open to migrant workers. They're picking a few winners there. But basically, the thing is we are getting back to normal. And I know the government's pollsters are telling them that's what they need to do. And also there is a narrative abroad that we've done incredibly well during COVID. The government has been amazing and always handled as well as it could have been with the best possible medical advice. But during, I guess, the darkest days of COVID, there were people who were saying we could have and should have been doing better. And they were coming up with alternate ideas to the highly bureaucratic and, it would seem to me, slow-moving solutions that were presented out of the beehive by politicians and experts. One of those who was most vocal, and I think if you took the time to listen to him over the last couple of years, made the most sense, was Sir Ian Taylor, the head of animation research. And I know he's heading off overseas, but he's done us the great privilege of joining us here on the platform this morning. Ian, g'day, mate. How are you?
Morning, Sean. Good to see you, mate.
All right. Look, freedom is on its way. That's the message. That's the spin we're getting out of the beehive right now, that it's all over. Does that make everything that happened all right? Do we forgive, do we forget, and do we move on? Or do you still have a feeling that we could have done better and our government wasn't responsive to ideas that came from outside of the Beltway?
No, I really think that, if we're to learn anything from what's happened, we do need some sort of inquiry, some commission of inquiry, so we don't continue to make the same mistakes. And, this was never political. When I first reached out, I seriously thought that there would be a response. Just to put this in context, on January the 11th, 2020, I was flying to Abu Dhabi on the first of it. This was going to be our biggest year. January the 11th, I landed in Heathrow Airport on the way to Abu Dhabi, and I picked up a Guardian newspaper, and on page 6 of that paper was a story about a 61-year-old man who died of pneumonia in a place called Wuhan that I'd never heard of. Fast forward to March the 13th, so that's less than 3 months later. I remember thinking, gee, could be in trouble in China with this. 3 months later, the whole world was closed. We had lost every contract in the world, and you knew that this thing was moving fast. And, we talk about looking at things in hindsight. And when I look at the government stance of saving lives, the thing that they missed out was we had to save lives and livelihoods. They put a focus solely on saving lives. That was the easy way out, because the simplest thing to do was lock your borders and not let anyone in. The real thinking, we were a small island nation at the bottom of the world. We had the chance to lead the world in our response. And I think we've lost that chance. And I think that the cost, we are still talking about how many lives we saved. We are still looking at reports that say 28 people died today, so-and-so died today. I'm with my son, who's a surgeon. He said, why aren't they adding all of the lives that have been lost today? It's like the only thing we're focused on is COVID. And when we started out, from our response, we should have been looking at saving lives and livelihoods. And I think our failure to look at saving livelihoods will cost our tamariki, our rangatahi, for decades to come.
And saving livelihoods, to I guess summarise where you were at, it seemed to me early on, is that we still had to have people, we had to have commerce and people and business flowing, and the systems of quarantine and isolation and our managed quarantine were actually stifling and killing, to a certain extent, economic activity in business. You came up with a whole lot of whiz-bang technologies that we could use and computer programs we could use. The great thing was, and I don't think you were political. You never made this a party political thing. You were just like practical. Here are some practical solutions. This could work really, really quickly. What was the response you got when you reached out?
Absolutely zero. I mean, and it wasn't just me, you know. I mean, I was the face of this, but there was a group called the Cross Sector Group and Cross Sector Border Group, based out of Auckland, well, based nationally, but basically in Auckland. It included hotels, it included building companies. I mean, it was huge, and they were not being listened to either. So within 48 hours, that group put together a strategy. Our first focus was that, you know, all of this money we're spending, all of this taxpayers' money is generated by businesses, and a huge amount of that comes from overseas. We have just shut our borders. The business are starting to roll. We need to find another way to get our business people overseas and back. And we proved that that could be done using New Zealand technologies that had been ignored. And the thing that I find really, really disappointing is the recent, you know, the reporters have had you had to use the Official Information Act to get to see information that has been hidden from us. But on November the 15th, when we delivered a solution that Ernst Young said could be deployed tomorrow on scale and start bringing people home before Christmas, that was the same date that the ministry had advised the government that they should look at ways of changing and winding back the MIQ. We offered that solution, and they never put the two of us together. If we'd sat around a table with that view on one side, our solution, it would have been adopted. But, you know, Sean, the reason I guess I spoke out was I heard a story about an immigrant, high-tech immigrant, that had been brought to the country because we were short of people. He came early on the promise that his pregnant wife and daughter would be joining him. They locked the border after he got here. His son was 2 years old and he hadn't seen him. And, you know, those things, and the Kiwis who were stranded overseas, who couldn't get home for funerals, who couldn't get home because who had lost their visas, that's inhumane. And that should have been our focus. We should have figured out that is the most important thing. We can bring them home. We need to bring them home, but nobody tried.
Yeah, well, it was easy to get in, though, Ian, if you were a DJ and you had some rave or gig that you were involved in. Your business friends should have just rebranded themselves with some DJ handle.
Well, you could have, you know, and, you know, we could sort of delve into that, but there was just this much bigger issue. And one of the things was, you know, the government has been late on everything. They were late on vaccinations. They were late on rapid antigen tests. And what really, really shocked me was that they had been offered a solution now 2 years ago from a test. We should have been should have focused on testing. Vaccination was really important, but you could be vaccinated. You still didn't know whether you had it or not. The most important thing we needed was testing. And there was a test that was offered to the country that could give you a PCR equivalent test in under 30 minutes. And I was sent that email and the email response from the government, which was thanks, but no thanks. It was called Lucira.
Yeah.
If I could just put it in context, because I just got it, I mean,
yeah.
The whole frustration really boiled over for me this week. It was called Lucira. We trialed it. Governments all over the world had trialed it. It had been approved everywhere. I finally got I got 8 of them into the country in December. I shared that with Aisha. I actually sent them to Aisha Varel, Grant Robertson, and Air New Zealand. Said, here's our solution. We could test people before they get on the plane, 2 hours, so we know they're clear getting here, test them 1 hour after they get here, and we could start taking the pressure off MIQ. So that's 6 months ago nearly, and nothing has happened. I ordered a shipment now to keep my people safe. It has been confiscated at the border. And the irony of that is I've just been in Las Vegas. Coming back to New Zealand, I could take a Lucira test, and that was okay for me to get into New Zealand. They have confiscated the supply of Lucira that I had brought into the country to keep my people
And
safe.
those were under changes recently introduced about basically nationalising in this time certain resources. I know that Reiko Science, who were offering alternatives, also ran foul of this. I want to drill down to this. So you had a shipment of how many tests were you bringing in, Ian?
So we were, just to put it in context, when they were starting to confiscate, and they requisitioned rapid antigen tests. They were late approving them. They requisitioned from businesses, and I have evidence of that. In the space of less than a week and a half, a small group of business people bought in 65 million for the government. That was never acknowledged. And I remember when we did it.
So how many tests did you bring in? And money does matter. How much had you paid for them?
No, so the rapid antigen tests that we bought in, there were 65 million of those bought in for the government. And I thought this would prove what happens when government, if you get business involved, we can solve that big problem. Now, this other shipment is about 70 rapid antigen tests. They're $70 each, and that's my choice. Now, one of the things, rapid antigen tests have a function, but this test is what I want my people taking because it tells them within 30 minutes with a high level of certainty whether they've got it. Now, that should be my call. Now, and I'm prepared to pay that to keep my people safe. That's a health and safety issue. So my question to the Prime Minister is, have you taken over that responsibility? I have found something that will keep me safe. You just let it be. Anyone coming to the country uses it at the other end and can get in here, but your people have just taken 70 of those that would keep my people safe as they start to travel the world. And it's that bureaucratic nonsense that has been running all the way through this.
All right, you call it bureaucratic nonsense. I'm going to tell you, as someone involved in media and a journalist, this is not entirely foreign, this concept of a beehive and an administration that unless you are an insider and an accepted insider, you get no, and people in the media know this, you get no access. There is no cooperation there. You are either in or you are out. And it seems to me, and for reasons given your reputation and history as a really patriotic and innovative New Zealand, that it seems to me maybe the decision was made early on that you were on the outside and you were never getting in. Did you feel it was ever personal? And were you, and I know you've dealt with governments in various capacities over the years, did you feel it was personal? Did you feel they were just too busy? Or was there something deeper behind it? Philosophical maybe, or if you like, ideological?
Yeah, I think, Sean, it's really interesting because I have heard those arguments coming from media and from you. And in those days when you first talked this, I actually thought it was, this was kind of
I was being a paranoid nut job. Come on, you can say it.
Absolutely. You were being a paranoid nut job. But actually, once I got involved, I was really critical of the way media were responding to this, taking the messages from the 1 o'clock briefing, 1 o'clock briefing every day. Why aren't you asking these questions? So I thought the media had let us down until I started digging into this. And honestly, I think we have been governed by the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet. Brooke Barrington, somebody who we've never heard of, I've never heard of, who is paid by the taxpayer. What I have heard, and I have had contact even from within the government, asking me to keep the pressure up, keep this going, because everything seemed to have shifted to a bureaucrat called Brooke Barrington, who actually made all of the calls. And I had expected that when we put this really serious proposition together, funded privately, backed by Ernst Young, that the least I would have had was a call from Brooke Barrington to say, let's have a talk about this.
Who is Brooke Barrington? You're way ahead of me.
Okay, look him up. He's paid $680,000 a year out of the government's things. He is the head of the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet.
Of course he is. Sorry, you're right.
And nothing comes out of that. None of those press releases that are made come out without just them being ticked from that department. They have sat silently behind the doors. They have kept the Official Information Act jammed shut, and reporters have had to fight. Somebody had to fight for 3 months to get hold of emails that I actually had sitting on my computer. And that whole stuff about requisitioning stuff, I saw computers that actually said that for 24 hours until Brooke Barrington's team got hold of everybody and said, do not use the word requisition.
All right, so you are now talking, Ian, as this conversation develops, about more than simply, gliding on the slow-moving bureaucracy, its tendency towards incompetence and stuff-ups. You're talking about a Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, a beehive, a ninth floor, that has exercised a dictatorial control or a highly manipulative control and has not accepted offers of help or, if you like, offers of collaboration and creative collaboration with anyone out, and I said it to you before, anyone outside that inner circle, anyone approved.
No, exactly. That's exactly what happened. And let me talk in defense of some of the CEOs of government departments. I know some of them. I've worked with some of them, and when they're given the power to move, they're really impressive. But the most common call I would have from the CEOs of public departments were, this work you're doing is really cool. We are here to support you if we can, but we can't do anything. We can't say anything until the government instructs us. Right now, it's not government policy, so there's no way we can help you. And, so it's easy to blame the bureaucrats, but, let's put this in context as well. The government was advised.
Oh, have we lost him? Have we lost him?
Looks like he's dropped off there.
Get him back. Get him on the phone there, Ben, because that was getting real interesting. I was absolutely on the end of my seat. So I just want to recap as we try and re-establish contact. That's terrible. That's ironic too. Ian Taylor runs some of the coolest tech gear and television gear in the world, and we had an issue, but we're trying to get him back. I want to basically summarise what he's told us so far. He's telling us the government, and more importantly, the Prime Minister's department throughout COVID, was basically turning away, spurning offers of help and collaboration from all sorts of people. And he's particularly identified, Brooke Barrington, the head of the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. I really want to get him back because... And I also love the fact that he said, Sean, when I listened to some of the stuff you were saying, and that must have been online or on social media, I thought you were a conspiracy theorist nut job. And now I realise there was some truth in what you were saying. I'm not going to pat myself on the back because we're desperately trying to get hold of Ian right now. Why don't we'll just take a break and we'll try and sort this out. Oh, he's there. He is there. We've got you back, Ian. Yeah, we have got you back, Ian. What? You're the technology guy. What happened there?
Mate, I wouldn't have a clue. I don't know anything about technology.
Hey, so you're saying, and I'm going to sort of give a counter argument. You said at the very beginning, you think we need a commission of inquiry. Given the level of information control and the insular nature of the Prime Minister's department, I'm going to frankly tell you, you could have a commission of inquiry and it won't get anywhere because of exactly the circumstances you've just described. It will simply be a bureaucratic waste of taxpayers' money, won't it?
I mean, yes, it is possible, but I've had this. I started this. Let me jump back. I understand exactly why we had to go into that very first lockdown. I mean, we had no idea what we're facing. The world went into the lockdown, and we came out, and then we patted ourselves on the back. We lauded ourselves and I was one of those doing that. And it wasn't until August, a year later, 16 months later, that we went into that other infamous lockdown that had locked Auckland locked away for 100 days or whatever, that I realised that we had spent 16 months and the lockdown we went into was identical to the first one. We had learnt nothing. And we found that, we had this crazy situation where the government had decided what an essential business was. Where they should have started over the 16 months was said, now let's get back to ground one. Every business is essential to everyone working in them. So let's put some things in place that if this hits us again, if you can meet these requirements, you can go back to work. And there were countless examples 16 months later of how work could have continued with certain conditions, but they weren't done. We went back to the same lockdown. So we had that crazy situation at our work where it was Thursday. We had now found a way to remotely operate to all our tournaments, sports tournaments around the world. We had 4 of those running at the same time on Thursday out of our office in Dunedin. That was being run by 3 guys who flatted in the same house. So I assumed that because they flatted in the same house, they could come down, because this business was essential to us, they could come down and continue to deliver our service to the world. When I spoke to the officials, they said, you're not an essential business, so they can't do that. So those 3 guys could live together in a flat. They could go to a supermarket with a whole lot of unvaccinated people, but they couldn't come to a building where there was no one else. And that was, you just realized we had done nothing over 16 months. And what my team did was they went, oh, well, if those are the rules, let's take our bed down and we'll turn work into a flat and we'll stay there. And they lived in the building for 4 weeks. And that was unnecessary.
It could have been easier. Look, while you're talking about the business, and thank you so much for your... have you been politicised by this experience or not? No,
I haven't. I often say that this was never political, and I get into trouble. People give me a hard time when I say, I have voted Labour all my life. I believe in capital gains tax. I couldn't believe the Prime Minister just ruled it out. There's all sorts of things. I do sit on that side of the fence. I voted National twice. I voted for National when John Key recognised the Māori Party with Peter Sharples, and I voted National again when Bill English declared that any money spent by government had to show a social return on investment. And I thought those were really great platforms. But this isn't a Labour government, I recognise, and it has gone to this ideological, it's happening. This will sound strange, but it's happening in our New Zealand history curriculum as well. Yeah, I'm a huge fan for that, but as Tiffany O'Regan, the great Tiffany O'Regan, has said to me, that thing that has been run by this government, this ministry, has taken one false narrative and replaced it with another. And I despair at where we are going at the moment. I don't want it to be political. I'd love people in the spirit of Talanoa. This is a Pacific Island concept, which is whenever you meet, you talk and listen with respect. You don't have to agree. You talk and listen with respect. And that's just not happening. I think the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet needs to come into focus. But we need to bring them under the magnifying glass, because I believe they have been running the country since COVID started.
And not particularly well, or not as well as it could be run.
No.
Look, just quickly, I want to talk quickly about a couple of other things. How is the business going? Sports kind of backing up, though I get the feeling that what we watch, and I look at Super Rugby in New Zealand, we've broken a whole lot of viewing and cultural habits, and things are kind of moving around in terms of audience participation, sport, and what's rating on television. How's the business going? Are you sort of back in business and full steam ahead?
Honestly, Sean, COVID is the best thing that could have happened to us. One of the things we did, so, I look back at it, we didn't actually say this at the front, but, there's a Maori saying, the footsteps we lay down in a path create the paving stones of where we stand today, and they're always in front of you. So even as I look over this period, we did set out from day one to make sure we saved lives and livelihoods. And then what we did was we guaranteed, the first thing we did was guarantee everybody in our company that no matter what, nobody would lose their jobs. We would use all our reserves to make sure no one lost their jobs, because that was important, that we hit the ground running when we came out. And then we said, now, what's the world going to look like? And the team were just phenomenal. So we have been delivering all of our sports remotely around the world from our office in Dunedin. On one particular day, we were doing golf in Abu Dhabi, Florida, Prague, and New York, and doing the Major League Baseball from Sydney and Melbourne, all from our office in Dunedin.
Amazing.
The it has been the most amazing thing. And it came from the fact that the team went, actually, COVID isn't a challenge. It's an opportunity. Let's go take it.
All right. Are you involved with this Greg Norman thing, this alternate to the PGA?
No, actually, kind of interesting. So we are the sole provider for all the PGA tournaments. So we've been very careful about this one. I mean, that was just remarkable what our mate said yesterday, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. That was a bit of foot and mouth disease, wasn't it? I understand you're jumping on a plane and you're heading back to Dunedin.
I do, Sean. Yeah. They're just knocking on the door. You're knocking on the door now, so I better go.
Hey, thank you so much for your time, Ian, this morning. I'd love to catch up to you for a beer at some stage in the very near future. Cheers, mate.
Let's do that. See ya.
Cheers. Bye. That is Sir Ian Taylor from Animation Research. Wow, I am kind of reeling from the information he gave us and the very honest perspectives he gave us. And I will tell you something about Sir Ian Taylor. He is not a guy who is bluster. He is someone who speaks his mind clearly and concisely, and a very credible individual.